The Fox Kids Club is brought to you by the Eclipse Studios Patreon. You can find it at www.patreon.com/Eclipse Studios Network. Your contribution will be greatly appreciated, as every dollar goes towards research, production software, stock footage, and everything needed to create the best video that I can. You can also support me by subscribing to my channel, hitting the bell icon for notifications, and spreading the word far and wide on social media. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
Good evening. This is the 10 o'clock news. I'm Steve Powers. And today, confirmation of the largest single broadcast station transaction in history. It's part of an even bigger deal involving more than $2 billion and the sale of 7 Metromedia stations, including this one, Channel 5, to media mogul Rupert Murdoch. Under the agreement confirmed today, the Hearst Corporation will buy Metromedia's television station in Boston for $450 million. And as Christopher Jones reports, the rest of the huge deal should be completed on Monday.
Considering the size of the deal and its implications for the American communications business, today's announcement was remarkably low-key. But when Australian publishing magnate Rupert Murdoch walked into the Waldorf Tower suite with Metromedia chairman John Kluge, it was clear the deal was done, and the nation's largest independent television group was about to be a jewel in Murdoch's crown.
The deal as contemplated would be that a partnership would be buying these Metromedia stations, which is the same partnership as owns 20th Century Fox, so it's Mr. Marvin Davis and my company, News Corporation.
The man who has been the ultimate authority at the Fox network since its inception has been media mogul Rupert Murdoch. Old Rupert is not the ultimate subject of our story here. Indeed, he would be wooing sports leagues and laying the groundwork for his cable news network while the story of Fox Kids was going on. Australian-born Rupert Murdoch inherited his father's company, News Limited, in 1952, embarking on a period of expansion and embracing a populist approach. Indeed, The Economist credits him with inventing the modern tabloid. In 1968, he entered the UK, first with the purchase of the now-defunct News of the World, then the 1969 acquisition of The Sun, and the 1970 purchase of a stake in struggling ITV station, London Weekend Television. In 1974, Rupert came to America, first with a paper in San Antonio, and 2 years later acquiring the struggling New York Post and injecting it with his trademark character. In March 1984, he bought into the storied 20th Century Fox movie studio. And it's with that purchase that the story of the Fox network truly begins. In May 1985, he announced that he was buying up the 6 Metromedia independent stations. The reason for the acquisition soon became clear. Murdoch was planning to use those 6 stations, all in large markets including New York, LA, and Chicago, as the nucleus of a new 4th television network. Plans for a 4th network had bounced around various companies since the original 4th network, DuMont, faded away in the 1950s. Paramount, for example, had planned the Paramount Television service in the 1970s, and its flagship show was slated to be a revived Star Trek. When that network fell through, that revived Star Trek became that franchise's first feature film. What made this attempt different was that increase in the viability of independent stations. There were enough to go around now to make nationwide availability feasible, and because cable was a thing, the new network would be on a more level playing field, though not equal to the established stations, and the perception of a coat-hanger network would linger for several years.
It may be on a lousy channel, but The Simpsons are on TV.
With the Metromedia deals closing in March 1986, Murdoch ramped up planning for the new network. Usually, the market's top-rated independent would be that market's charter affiliate. One example being Philadelphia's Channel 29, not owned by Fox yet, but owned by Taft Broadcasting. There were some exceptions. In some markets, the former Metromedia station, now owned by Fox, was not the market's top indie station. Chicago's a big example here because Fox now owned Channel 32, but far and away the leading independent station was Channel 9, WGN. In still other cases, the top independent just declined the affiliation whatsoever. For our purposes, the actual launch of the network happened on April 5th, 1987, the first official night of primetime. It was technically on the air before then, but the name Fox wasn't even in use yet, so we're going to go with April 5th, 1987. It did not have an auspicious beginning, but its first two primetime shows defined the network. The first, Married with Children, showcased an attitude and edge that the big three networks honestly did not have, at least in their comedies at that time. Indeed, its working title was a direct shot at the #1 show on NBC.
They're not the Cosbys, they're the Bundys, and they're married with children.
It had modest ratings at first, but an attempted boycott ended up being the very definition of the Streisand effect, so it became a hit. The second show launched on that night, The Tracy Ullman Show, was a sketch comedy less important for the actual show and more important for the crew cartoons that aired right before a commercial break. And it spawned the longest running primetime series in the history of television. You might know it. It's called The Thompsons. But Fox would work on expanding its programming ambitions in areas other than primetime. Now's a good time to mention the actual head of 20th Century Fox and the Fox network, Barry Diller. Remember how I just mentioned that attempt at a fourth network that Paramount made in the 1970s? You can credit Barry Diller for that. Diller was very keen on the idea, to the point where he actually left Paramount when his boss at Gulf and Western scrapped the idea. You want to know who worked under Barry Diller at Paramount? Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg. So it might not surprise you that the lead broadcaster for DuckTales was the Fox television stations and many of the Fox affiliates. DuckTales was a hit. The higher quality animation set it apart from pretty much everything in afternoons at the time, and it was the highest rated animated series of the 1987-88 season. It spawned 100 episodes over 4 seasons, 1 theatrical movie, and 1 reboot that is arguably held in greater regard than the original. The success of DuckTales led to more Disney animated productions. In 1989, Disney would introduce Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, again for syndication, and again a huge hit. Disney mobilized their TV animation division to produce 1 new show for syndication each year after that. For fall 1990, that would be Tailspin, a new show using characters from the beloved Disney classic The Jungle Book. Gummy Bears was also put back into production, so for 1990, Disney had 4 cartoons in syndication at the same time, enough to fill the prime 3 to 5 afternoon slot. Say, that's a good name, Disney Afternoon. Let's call it that. But there was trouble brewing between Disney and its network partner of choice. It is here that we get into somewhat muddled territory. The general story is Disney screwed Fox by taking their shows away from that network's owned and operated stations, or O&Os, so Fox created Fox Kids in retaliation. The actual story is a little more complex. I've been chiefly consulting 2 books here, one chronicling the rise of Fox in general named The Fourth Network, and one detailing the turbulent reign of Michael Eisner at Disney, James B. Stewart's Disney War. Both present origins of Fox Kids that diverge from each other. In Disney War, the incident that incited the split was Disney entering the broadcast business for the very first time. Not the way you're thinking, because Disney's acquisition of ABC didn't come for a couple of years. Instead, after a long license battle with the FCC, the owner of KHJ TV9 in Los Angeles put that station up for sale. Disney ended up winning the bidding war, rechristening it KCAL 9, and naturally Disney wanted their cartoons on the Disney television station. One problem! Disney's cartoons were already carried on Fox's LA O&O, KTTV Fox 11. The feud began when Disney bought a Los Angeles television station, named it KCAL, and wanted to air Disney Afternoon, the block of children's programs being carried by Diller's Fox affiliates, including one in Los Angeles. Eisner had Katzenberg call Diller. In Diller's recounting of the discussion, Katzenberg said, "We want to renegotiate Disney Afternoon, and we're taking away the LA market." Diller was shocked. They had a contract. "That's not fair," he protested. "I know you bought an LA station, but give us 2 or 3 years to replace this. Let's be reasonable." Diller called Eisner, who refused. "We were there for you when you needed us," Diller reminded him, pointing out that he'd bought the original programming for Disney Afternoon. Eisner still refused. "Okay then, we're out of business," Diller said. Other sources paint a different picture. According to Daniel M. Kimmel's The Fourth Network, How Fox Broke the Rules and Reinvented Television, the inciting incident wasn't necessarily Fox retaliating against Disney for moving its cartoons, but affiliate stations just getting tired of the increasing leverage that Disney and other syndicators had over them. Most syndicated shows, from DuckTales then to something like Jeopardy now, are made available through something called barter syndication. Basically, that meant the production company offers the shows to the station for free, with the catch that a certain amount of advertising time per hour is given over to them. So, let's say it's 1989 and you want to run DuckTales. DuckTales episodes are 24 minutes, which leaves 6 minutes in the half hour for advertising. Disney would take 2 minutes of that for national ads where it would keep the proceeds, and the remaining 4 minutes would be left for the station to sell for itself. By 1989, when Disney was becoming the market leader, they were starting to turn the screws to their stations and took more of the advertising time for themselves. Advertising is the lifeblood of local stations. The more local money, the better. This is one reason why most stations now run hours of local news programming a day, because 100% of that ad revenue goes to the local station. They don't have to give CBS anything. They get all of it. So Disney claiming more of that revenue for themselves was great for Disney, not so great for Fox 26. The syndicators that were clearing kids shows on our stations were increasing the barter load every year. Every 6 months, it seemed like, recalled former Grand Rapids station executive Patrick Mullen. We went from 2 minutes to 2.5 to free, and even threats of 3.5 minutes per show in barter load. So we were losing our commercial avails, and the kids' business was a huge source of revenue for all of us at that point. Even other studios were complaining about Disney's strong-arm tactics. An article in the May 23, 1990 issue of Variety details an unknown syndicator's claim that Disney was forcing stations to clear the entirety of their expanded Disney Afternoon lineup, charging that it was trying to eliminate all competition. So, it wasn't just Fox that had problems with Disney. The affiliate owners and managers themselves had growing concern. In fact, the person we can most accurately call the father of Fox Kids wasn't Rupert Murdoch, wasn't Barry Diller, wasn't even network president Jamie Kilner. It was Harry Pappas, the owner of several Fox affiliates. In 1989, station owner Harry Pappas, a California businessman who owned a group of stations in 6 states, including California, Nevada, and North Carolina, approached Fox president Jamie Kellner with an idea. Why don't you do for us and kids what you're doing for us in prime time? Kellner liked it immediately. The concept of how Fox would sell network kids programming to the affiliates was the real genius of Pappas's suggestion. Unlike anything offered by the Big Three to their affiliates, the Fox Kids Network would be co-owned by Fox and the individual stations, with the stations sharing in the eventual profits when they occurred. That proved to be a great incentive to get the stations to run the Fox Network's cartoon shows instead of cutting their own deals with Disney. I basically used Harry Pappas to kind of front the whole thing. Ideas that come from the affiliate groups are received better by the affiliates than the network ideas, said Kellner. That little wrinkle really was a selling point to the affiliates. When Mighty Morphin Power Rangers made it big, the network president was able to get affiliates to carry the show by offering them a cut of the toy sales. So was the creation of Fox Kids retaliation towards Disney? I'm gonna say no. At least not entirely. Yes, Fox had every reason to tell the mouse to fuck off with its demands to move its programming off of its LA stations. But many stations were starting to have problems with Disney and other syndicators, creating an environment where the stations were willing to seek an alternative. They had skin in the game. So even if Disney and Fox didn't have a rift, it's extremely likely the stations would look to Fox for an alternative anyway. There's one more reason I'm more apt to go with Kimmell's account over Stewart's book. Disney War has a lot of information about the sale of Fox Family Channel and the Fox Kids properties to Disney, and that's something that we will cover late in this series. This includes the claim that Disney had to keep the word family in the channel's name in perpetuity. Whether this was even true or not is a matter of dispute, because the channel, by then ABC Family, did drop family from the name in January 2016, adopting the name Freeform. Simply put, there's a lot more evidence that Fox Kids was established because of a variety of factors, and not simply a retaliation against Disney for pulling their shows from Fox stations. So, on June 14th, 1989, Fox officially announced the creation of what internally would be known as the Fox Children's Network. Just as Pappas proposed, it would be a profit-sharing venture between the network and the affiliates, legally separate from the main Fox broadcasting company. This was also convenient because Fox was technically illegal. This is vastly oversimplifying things, but at the time, networks could not own their own production studio. There was a loophole. You were only a network if you programmed a certain amount of hours, and Fox programmed just enough hours to stay under that limit. That didn't mean that Fox was immune to legal scrutiny. In fact, Disney used those technical violations as the basis of 2 actions in early 1990 meant to derail the launch of Fox Kids. The first was a petition to the FCC against a waiver that Fox was seeking to allow it to escape the existing regulations. The second was a 5-count antitrust lawsuit alleging that Fox was strong-arming their stations to carry Fox Kids instead of Disney Afternoon. 3 of the stations named in the suit as being strong-armed, however, denied any wrongdoing on the part of Fox, and even emphasized, hey, the Kids Network was their idea. That didn't mean that everyone was on Fox's side. KCPQ, the Fox station in Seattle, inked a deal to carry the Disney Afternoon, and was publicly blasted by Fox affiliate committee chairman Kevin O'Brien for doing so. to the point of threatening to strip the station of its affiliation. This was an outlier, however, and by all accounts, Disney was much more of the aggressor. Kevin O'Brien's own station, KTVU, was stripped of its Disney affiliation. It might not surprise you that the antitrust suits were dropped a few years into Fox Kids' run. The petition also failed, as Fox did end up getting that waiver. The whole rule was actually repealed later in the 1990s. To the benefit of Disney, of course, because they proceeded to buy up ABC.